Hello, everyone. We are starting today's session, today's webinar about IT gatekeepers and interviews. The idea is that today we are going to talk about um, what could you expect on your technical interview, on your first technical interview as a junior test engineer, and what are the possible questions, and basically what could you expect there, and what are the expectations from you. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Lozovan Evgeny, and I'm a test automation engineer. So this is my primary focus, my professional focus. So as I said, functional test automation plus teaching. So let's start. So here's our plan for today. First, we'll talk about modern applications. What are they? Then we'll talk about some internal process in some IT company which decided to hire a new person, a new engineer. And the final part, the last one for today, would be discussion of interviewing process and what kind of questions you could get there. Okay, so let's talk about modern applications. So basically, modern applications, they are like icebergs. So you have a small portion above the sea, above the water level, and this is usually some graphical user interface, all these fancy and nice pages, if you're talking about web application. And the biggest part, 90% of the system is somewhere there on server side, on the background, under the water. And it's usually not visible to end user. And as a test engineer, you expected to understand what's going on both sides, on the UI side, on backend side, what's going on inside. And imagine a situation that as a test engineer, you started testing your application, and at some point something happened, just a small nuclear explosion, just a small explosion. And as a customer, at this point, you're not expected to provide any technical details. So you could stop here and say and tell the developers, okay, so nothing works. I did something, it stopped to work, please fix, and this is it. But as a test engineer, you are supposed to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and to play a role of an investigator. So this is a kind of investigation. So you are supposed to find out what was the root cause of that blast, or what was the root cause of that anomaly or possible issue. So whether it was something wrong with your graphical user interface, or whether you faced some services problem, or did you get a network issue? It could be the case that your database is broken, or there is some inconsistency in your storage, so data is broken. And on the other hand, you could have some integration issues, because nowadays our applications, they are tightly coupled with other systems, so there is some integration between IT systems, computer systems, and that integration could be broken. And or you just have some issues with your environment, so with your server itself, with some hardware issues, whatever. So as a test engineer, you're supposed to investigate that stuff, to get to the root cause, and to collect as many information, as many details as possible. And what should go next? So you are not alone on your team or on your project. There are other people on that iceberg, on the top of that iceberg, and those other people, they are part of your team, part of your development team. So developers, system analysts, project managers, product owners, etc., etc. And those guys, they are interested in the details you gathered so far about that anomaly. And you should communicate your findings to those people. You should share the detailed information with them. And one small trick, one small nuance here, actually, those people, they are quite different. So like some of them more technical, some of them less technical, some of them not technical at all. And you should provide your findings, you should communicate that information to each of them. And you should use different kind of language, different wording for different people. This could be tricky, but as a test engineer, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to use your knowledge to communicate the information, and that communication should go smoothly and effectively. So as a result, as a test engineer, you are supposed to be an expert in application structures. So you're supposed to be a technical expert, quite experienced and technical guy. Next, you should be able to work to process big volumes of information. Usually, it's about reading and analyzing in a fast manner of any type of documentation, specifications, requirements, use cases, user stories, some tickets, bug reports, etc. So you should be able to process that information quickly and extract useful parts out of it. And finally, you should be a good communicator. So you should be able to read easily, write easily, listen and speak. So, and all of this should be you as a test engineer. So you should be able to do pretty much everything. So this is about modern applications. Now let's talk about positions, QA positions, which you could face, and about some processes which going on inside IT companies, inside IT company when it decides to hire a new person, hire a new engineer. So here's a nice picture, and in the background somewhere there we have the application, the application which should be tested. And that application is quite mature at this moment, and there are people who cares about it. I mean, IT people, test engineers who already tested for some time. And those people, they are kind of gatekeepers. So those two guys which are in front. And what does it mean? So those guys, they love the application, so they spend a lot of time, they put a lot of effort to make that application as good as it's possible, and they would like that application to be as good as possible in the future as well. So then when they are asked about guys, do you need any help? What about hiring a new engineer? What are the requirements for that person? They start thinking, they start worrying about that new person, new possible colleague, because whether that guy would be as careful as them, whether that guy would put as much effort as them, will it be able to, will he be able to, sorry, to support the application to make it better and better and better. So, as I told you, they are kind of gatekeepers at this moment, and their job at this point, to provide some description, job description, some requirements to that new hire, to that new engineer. So they asked by upper management about those requirements. They sum their thoughts, and they provide job description to someone inside the company. And guess what? At some point of time, that job description appears on some job seeking site. And here's a real example of such job description. And let's have a closer look at that. So what do we have in terms of requirements? So they would like a new manual engineer to perform manual testing of basic applications. Okay, sounds interesting. And that new person should be able to manually test websites, mobile apps, and something else. Okay, and they talk something. There's a word about exploratory testing. Interesting. We'll discuss that in a minute. Okay, so take participation in improving, creating, maintaining test cases, test runs, execute tests, document, check defects, okay, and collaborate with the team. Okay, so here we have a list of requirements. Here's some list of things which that new person should fit into. Okay, and let's go one by one through that list. Okay, so when it says manual testing web-based applications, what does it mean? It means that new engineer should know what is a DOMA, domain object model, document object model, sorry, and that guy should be able to use that information, that model upon testing. So that guy should be experienced with web services, REST web services, or SOAP web services, because nowadays REST web services are very popular. So I would say that each test engineer should know about that, should be experienced with that stuff. Okay, next, databases. So in any case, your application would have some storage, some database. It doesn't that important what kind of the database, SQL, NoSQL, or some cloud storage. It really doesn't matter. So you should be familiar with all kinds of storages, or at least you should be able to to become familiar in a fast manner. SQL. So if you're talking about databases, SQL is important. So you should be able to execute at least simple queries, and you should know where to find the information about more complex queries, of course. Integration principles. That new engineer should know about integration principles. Why? Because nowadays applications, in most cases, they are not standalone. They communicate with other systems, with other computer systems. So there's some integration between those systems. And as test engineer, you should be you should be aware of those principles, of approaches, how each one computer system could be integrated with another one. So you should know about that. Okay, then they talk about test cases and test runs. Meaning that's simple. So you're a test engineer, so you should know about test design techniques. You should know what are they. You should know how to apply them, how to use them in practice. To design test cases. Next, test engineers, they work quite a lot with documentation. There's different kinds of documentation. And this is not only about reading documentation, it's about creating some documents as well. So the candidate should be able to do that. And there's a word about exploratory testing. This is interesting. Here in this particular position, they talk about exploratory testing, and exploratory testing is a kind of special kind of testing when you don't have exact steps or exact scenarios, like concrete steps. This one goes after that one, etc., etc. Now, if you are doing exploratory testing, you are kind of investigating the application, trying to use it in some interesting way, some unpredicted way. So you are kind of a researcher, And probably it's not about junior test engineers, but who knows. Okay, what do we have else? So we have collaborate with a team. Okay, collaboration. A couple of minutes ago, I told you that you should gather, if you face an anomaly, you should gather as much information, as many details as possible. And after that, you should communicate that information to other guys, to other team members, or to interested parties. And how you could do that, if you're talking about some international team, of course, you should use your English. You should use your communication skills to do that. So again, what do we see here? That position requires, it asks for a person, quite a technical person. And on the other hand, that person should be able to work with documentation and to collaborate with the team, to talk to different people using different language, proper language. Okay, that was about manual testing. A couple words about test automation. So if we're talking about some job description for a test automation position, here's another real life example. Let's have a closer look. And you see, if you go through the list, what do we have here? So SQL, software development lifecycle, testing of applications, some analytical skills, communication, by the way. And this is very close to what we had for manual testing, actually, for manual position. And I would say this is kind of pretty much the same as for manual testers. The biggest difference and the principal difference between test automation position and the manual tester position is here in the orange rectangle. It's about being familiar with programming languages, some popular one or two popular programming languages like Java, Python, C#, JavaScript probably. And this is the biggest difference. And one more time, if you are talking about test automation position, you should be familiar both with testing itself, with all this testing stuff like test design, SQL, integration principles. You should be able to communicate with other people. And in addition, you should know programming. You should know something about coding. Okay, let's move further. Let's sum up a little bit what we've been talking about. So when a company, an IT company, decides that it's time to hire a new person, things go like that. So some technicians, IT gatekeepers, they asked to provide some requirements, some job description of the new position. So they do that and pass that information to probably some HRs or whoever. That is getting rewritten in a more human readable language by HR guys. And after some iterations back and forth, it goes to some job seeking site like Indeed, Glassdoor, or TopTotal, or whatever you have in your region. And probably at some point of time, you surf through that site. You are looking for some position for you, and you see that sorry, that job description. And guess what? You just sent your CV there to those guys. You just apply for the job. And the next part, the next phase is interview itself. So part 3 of our today's talk is about sorry, is about interview process. So imagine that you sent your CV, you applied for the job, and you got an invitation. So you are here at the interview, and what could you expect? Of course, in each particular company, they have their own scenario of a technical interview. But those scenarios, they are more or less similar to each other. Of course, there could be like different order or phases, but in general, usually you start with talking about yourself with some, some introduction of yourself. So you should tell them, your interviewers, about your experience, your motivation, and things like that. Usually, that's quite short part, something like 5 minutes or so. And after that, you should expect answer some questions from your interviewers, and usually those questions at this point, those questions just some some common questions about probably your motivation, about some details of your experience. So you should be able to answer those questions, of course. And after that, you should expect a number of technical questions. And of course, you could be asked to solve some tasks, and that's totally fine, especially if we are talking about some test automation. But what about those technical questions? So test design. We are talking about testing, so as a test engineer, you should be able to know. You should be able. Well, first thing you should know, and after that you should be able to use test design techniques and proper test design techniques depending on the functionality you are trying to test. So at this point, you could be asked to name test design techniques which you know. That's fine, and you could be asked to design some test cases for some particular functionality, for some web form or some application, something like that. And as I told you already, you should be able to use your knowledge to design those test cases. That's important, and that's actually a big part of test engineer job, to test design. Okay, expect questions about software development lifecycle. These questions are quite popular because your answers, they actually show your maturity level and your understanding of the whole process, who does what and when in IT. So questions about documents, process of documenting something, about reporting, about bug lifecycle, about bug reports, what could be placed inside bug reports, for example. So expect questions like that. More technical questions. Again, SQL, REST, or SOAP web services, or GraphQL web services nowadays, and GraphQL is getting more and more popular, so you could expect questions about GraphQL as well. You could be asked about client-server architecture. Again, of course, you're not expected to be an expert, in software architecture, but at least you should be able to understand what is client-server architecture, and what are the advantages and probably the disadvantages of such approach. Questions about networks. You could get them or could not, but I would expect questions like that for sure. Questions about Linux stuff, because quite often as test engineers, we should work with some Unix-based machines, some Unix-based servers, Unix or Linux, and you should know at least a couple of basic Linux commands useful for your everyday work. Okay, questions about testing tools. In the 21st century, we are not doing our testing just, without any additional tools or utilities. And for example, you could be asked about your experience with test management systems, TMS, for example, Qtest or TestRail, and different kinds of ticketing systems like Jira, the most popular one, Confluence, Bugzilla, etc., etc. Those tools, they're quite similar, and they have many things in common. So you should understand basic principles of them, and even if you have a lot of experience with them, you should be able to explain how to use them and what is your way of using them. Okay, if you're talking test automation position, expect questions about programming, I mean theoretical questions, and for sure you could be asked to code something to provide to show up your coding skills. Okay, that was about questions and answers, technical and not very technical. And probably by the end of the interview, your interviewers, those IT gatekeepers guys, they will tell you about the company itself, the project and the position, and you should be able to ask your questions after that. So probably, not only them have questions to you, but you also should have questions for them, like what is the company, what is the position, what is the role, what are the exact duties. I don't know whom I will be reporting to. Okay, so this is the end for the interview itself at this point, and this is time for you to get home and have some rest. And for your interviewers, for the IT gatekeepers, it's time to analyze your answers, to think about your answers, and decide whether you are suitable for the position or not. And couple words about different things during interviewing process. So English is crucial for international teams, and most likely your team will be international ones. So you have different people of different nationalities on the team, and guess what? You should talk to each of them using your English. But initially, most likely as a junior test engineer, most likely you will be communicating with your direct manager, your supervisor, and some leads only. That's probably the most possible way for you at the beginning. But as soon as you become more experienced with the company, with the application, you will start to communicate, to talk to other people, and practically to everybody on your team, including clients, product owners, and that simply means that your English should be good enough to communicate your ideas, to talk to those people about project needs, some technical stuff, and things like that. Okay, so one of the most popular questions probably for junior engineers or some course alumni is something like, why have you decided to become a tester? And you should provide a good answer actually on that question. But let's talk about don'ts. First thing, please don't provide any social significant answers. If you start talking, if you start answering in a way like, okay, I feel like application quality, software quality is very important, and this is my role to in this life to make each and every application better and better. Come on, guys, this is just ridiculous. So answers like testing is simple, and I will start as a tester and will eventually switch into developer's role when I become a little bit more clever. Okay, guess what? Most likely that answer will not make your interviewers happier. because it simply means that you are not motivated to become a good tester, to become a good test engineer. Your answer is, okay, I'm not very interested in testing, I just want money. Again, a good question for interviewers would be, why should I work with that people? Why should I let that person to join my team? So not a very good answer, actually. Basically, you should be honest. You should be honest, of course, and you should try to show you're interested in the position and profession itself. So you should be interested in testing. Remember, I told you that testing, at some point, testing is a kind of investigation. You are a kind of investigator or researcher, so, or detective, if you like. So, and if you love things like that, so you could become a good tester probably. Show that, demonstrate your interest in the position and in the profession itself during your first technical interview. Okay, couple words, couple hints about how to make your CV a little bit more visible and acceptable if you're a junior engineer or just course alumni. First thing, try to show any kind of testing experience. For example, you don't have any software testing experience, but you have some hardware testing experience. That's fine. So tell us about that. Show your testing experience, hardware testing experience. That's fine. Or another example, on your previous position, you were checking some documentation or writing some documentation. Okay, proofreading is actually kind of testing, static testing. So again, make an accent, show that in your CV. Okay, talk about, well, about your achievements in your CV. So like over last months, I did that, I managed to do that, etc., etc. But that's an interesting thing to read about. Show your ability to learn. So fast learners are very popular, let's call it that way, in IT, because in IT we need to process a lot of new information every day, and fast learners, you know, they have some advantage. So you could put something like, I managed to learn Python in 3 months, and that would be wonderful. You know, it would be great, for example, for me as interviewer to read things like that in your CV. Okay, cover letter. Cover letter is not very popular nowadays, especially in IT, but still, if you manage to get that cover letter and send it along with your CV, that's interesting. So at least at this position, your CV would differ from others, other CVs, you know, greatly, because practically nobody uses nobody uses cover letters nowadays. So surprise, surprise other guys, surprise your interviewers, and please don't put any irrelevant information into your CV, some spare information. So if you are a football fan, that's fantastic, and probably if you join the team, we could talk about that later. But please don't put that information into CV, because really, guys, nobody interested in that. We are interested in your testing experience, in your technical experience, and show that stuff in your CV. And please don't put any extra information there. Okay. Let's talk about what do you really need except skills to become successful in your interviews and in your QA engineer career. So you should be interested. You should be interested in the job itself, in the profession. We already talked about that, but one more time, you should be interested. And another thing here is you should be able to get fun just learning, because in IT we learn some new things every day. It's constant learning, never-ending learning, and you should be able to get fun out of it, and that's really fun. And you should at some point you should be a boredom, really, in a good sense, because test engineer should be very attentive to details, should be able to insist on some not very popular approaches or not very popular actions. So bear that in mind, please. Communication skills is crucial. Uh, we already told that several times today, that you gather information about some anomalies, some issues, and you share that information with other guys on your team. And those other guys, they are quite different people. I mean, so one people more technical, another part of the team is not that technical, and you should use proper language with different people on your team, and you should be able to communicate easily with any means, by the way. So it's emails, instant messaging, or just talk face to face. You should use any kinds of communication to be effective in your job. So, and the most important part, the most important item here is your ability to have rest. The better you rest, the better you test. So believe me, you should keep work-life balance very balanced, I would say, because if you spend 20 hours per day doing your testing job, okay, that's totally not good. Because you will burn out in a month, and nobody really needs that. So please keep work-life balance at a proper position, the proper mark. So this is basically it from my side. I will wait a minute or so for your questions. And if not now, if you have any more questions after this session, here's a couple of links you could use